Hello there guys and welcome back to the channel. Now, I did already make a video about Battlegrounds Power Snack Meta Defenders and the defenders that have been performing the best for me. And today is the counterpart of that. We're going to be talking about the offensive attacking champions in Battlegrounds. And there are definitely more champions that do work extremely well other than the 10 that I will mention. Majority of these top 10 champions are not sorted out in specific order, maybe aside from the very top ones, because, you know, it's all subjective, it's all perspective, and there are definitely a few champions that I wanted to give a shout out that didn't quite make it to top 10. Like America Chavez is actually insane for attack and defense, because only thing you have to do is throw 2 heavy attacks with America Chavez, and all of the power snacks, all of the rise to power abilities are reversed, and so is Mystic Dispersion. So it's extremely easy to control opponent's power, and America Chavez, whenever I have brought her in the fight, she always does finish the fight. Now, I have lost some of the matches using America Chavez down to the speed, because she's not the speediest attacker, but she definitely is a very reliable offensive option. Similarly as well, there is one of the new champions that definitely has saved my butt several times, which is Omega Sentinel, which I did not include in the top 10, but she definitely performs extremely well, primarily because she is immune to Nullify, and that is helping her immensely to deal with Power Snack. Right, these couple champions, and there would be a few more that I'm not going to shout out. Let's just get to the top 10. And I want to start off with Spiderman 2099. Now, this guy actually is kind of on the edge in and or out of my deck, because obviously he's not extremely capable defensively. And offensively speaking, I personally, when I face this guy, I don't fear him. And I need to be conscious of the fact that he does take longer than most attackers often to finish the fights. He works incredibly well. He effectively ignores the power snack completely because he cannot gain buffs. He's de facto one of the best counters for Man-Thing, but he takes a while. And I have won almost all of the matches when opponents use this guy, and I have lost some of the matches when I use this guy due to the speed. He works well. He finishes the fights with high HP and everything's fine, but for instance, if you both put Man-Thing down on defense, which this guy counters perfectly, but opponent uses one different champion that I'm going to mention later, you virtually always guarantee the loss there. So he works tremendously well, tremendously safe option. But unless an opponent that I'm facing has a rank 4 Spider-Man 2099, I'm really not bothered when they do get this guy and when they do get to use it, because of the time involved and because of how timing scores. Now we have Warlock. Warlock is still one of the offensive kings. He's such an amazing powerhouse. Obviously, that all depends whether opponents do have or do not have willpower, but I have won so many matches with this guy because he's obviously a defensive threat. Everybody does run that willpower, so you are, you have to be careful when you face Warlock, especially now, because cosmic champions or champions with a lot of buffs are not necessarily popular in this meta. That means that opponents often do not have good counters to Warlock. But also, on the other side, offensively speaking, the guy puts up enough damage with his level 2s, with his parry heavy bleeds, and the fact that he can consistently be attacking and he pretty much never has to bait out opponent's special attack is absolutely insane. The way I personally love to play Warlock often is just deny opponents any and all special attacks altogether, prevent them from getting even to a special attack. Guy's crazy good, an absolute machine. Not the quickest, but one of the most versatile offensive options. Now we're going to talk about Spider-Man. He has made a comeback in a big way. Definitely. He is one of those champions on whom I rely offensively a ton. He's one of the best offensive options for this meta, without a doubt, because he doesn't really have any natural buffs. And whilst, yeah, you do spend some time getting your poise charges, but then you can blitz your opponents down incredibly quickly. And then on top of that, you have access to that power drain on heavy attack. and you also have taunt, which obviously is extremely helpful. You have assisted auto evade and special attacks, which can let you avoid triggering power snack later on in the fight, because you will have to trigger it at least once. And the man's been putting in work, and a ton of work at that. One of my favorite and most used domino counters, because domino is extremely powerful defender these days. And yeah, definitely very capable attacker, and I actually took him to rank 3 specifically for this meta, and I hope I will get a decent use out of him, maybe in safeguard meta. We'll see about this, but for this meta in particular, he definitely is performing incredibly well. Let's move on to the next one, and next one is still Archangel. Obviously, Archangel is still crazy. I have started banning Archangel less recently, but still one of the most popular bans for a very good reason. And if the man has a matchup where he can work, he is more often than not going to win that match. The one criticism that I do have about Archangel right now is that he's still RNG reliant in terms of how quickly he can finish the fights. And this time around, that RNG impact is even bigger, because obviously Archangel's playstyle does involve knocking opponents down, which means that you will be triggering Rise to Power node, which means if you do not get your new rows up and running, the fights can get out of control. So that is kind of like even bigger aspect of whether you do or do not get lucky, because I have had fights where I think I'm safe and I'm gonna win, even if opponent is using an Archangel, and opponents get just insane RNG and do destroy my champion much quicker than I anticipated. And I have had fights where Archangel just doesn't perform and finishes fights very mediocrely, or messes up and gets KO'd. So there is quite a bit of RNG involved, which does make me uncomfortable at times. I personally have the feeling that I always get screwed over by his RNG, but definitely extremely powerful attacker. Next, we're gonna go with Kingpin. Kingpin actually once again shows his versatility, and again, Kingpin is a very rough defender as well. But offensively, what people often don't realize about Kingpin is that his special 1D generation reduces defensive ability accuracy by 65%, and that also works on Rise to Power. And with Kingpin in most matchups, you effectively are going to get into a rhythm where you're just going to spam your level 1s, keep 1 to 2 stacks of degen active, which is going to reduce opponents' attack drastically, but it's also going to pretty much shut down Rise to Power, going to let you be a lot more aggressive. And opponents' AI typically works in a way where if you keep knocking it down, they are more often than not much more inclined to throw their special attacks quickly. So I have definitely won many fights with Kingpin just to the fact that AI always seems to all of a sudden cooperate because you keep knocking them down. The degen is putting in work passively. Unless you got level 2, you don't really trigger any buffs. And obviously with Kingpin being a really sturdy dude, you can take block damage and specials in a block and then regenerate it later as well. And one of the coolest things about Rage is also that it increases your combat power rate, which again lets you spam more level 1s. And you don't often, have to trigger a single buff in a fight using Kingpin, and then you can finish off many kind of nasty opponents very easily. Next up is Human Torch. Human Torch is probably the champion I ban the most. I think pretty much the only reason I would not ban a Human Torch is if opponent doesn't have one. Other than that, this guy's always banned. Because Human Torch, in my eyes, is kind of like a great equalizer. Like when I might be able to outdraft the opponent, but at the very end, they get Human Torch, and that completely destroys half of my defense. The fact that, every time Human Torch is going to be used offensively, they're going to have the Nova Flames, which means nobody is immune to. And that, by definition, means that Human Torch can fight virtually any champion. And again, very significant portion of our defenders right now are Mystic or have energy damage, energy attacks, which just further fuels Human Torch. And yeah, to me, this is like an automatic ban, because it just works as a great equalizer, and I don't want that to happen. I want to be fighting, with the draft, with the champion choices. I want to be able to try and outdraft the opponent. And this 100% prevents that from happening. So that's a #1 ban for me. But again, each to their own. But yeah, Human Torch is always getting banned for me. Still incredible, obviously. Absolutely incredible here. Next up, Mr. Fantastic. Mr. Fantastic is definitely a top attacker in this meta because of his pre-fights, because of his willpower reversal. He's not the quickest attacker, but he does tackle virtually all of the most troublesome matchups in this current meta. You start a fight with 40% Petrify, which makes Power Snack incredibly less potent, and Rise to Power doesn't bother you that much either. Before long, you get the second one, and then you have 80% Petrify on the opponent, at which point you're going to be passively doing damage by reversing their willpower healing and, you know, having 3-4 debuffs on opponent at all times. And then at the same time, again, you completely ignore their power gain mechanics. I have used Mr. Fantastic to deal with Man-Thing. Totally doable because of this other pre-fight where you reduce the damage of their poison by 75% once you fully ramp up, and you get that armor break on you. So you actually end up finishing fights with pretty much full health. You can use him against Sasquatch, you can use him against Maw, Mojo. All of the roughest defenders pretty much, or most of them anyways, go down by Mr. Fantastic extremely well, including champions like Killmonger, for example. And on top of that, he's an extremely big threat on the defense as well because of his evade. Because of his evade, he is just very dangerous at all times as well. Right, so Mr. Fantastic, definitely one of the MVPs for me. One of the champions I always kind of tend to draft and rely on. SpiderHam. SpiderHam is similar to Starkenhand's Spiderman, except in my opinion even better for this meta, because you do not have to spend the time initially dexing and ramping him up and risking getting hit or messing up. SpiderHam has 2 different taunts to him. The second one that I have started relying on more and more, it has been incredibly useful as well. When you dash back and hold block, you have a 100% chance to evade the opponent's attacks, and then if you're awakened, you also inflict count on opponent, and that is extremely useful to basically just eat opponent's special attacks on block while auto evading them, and then inflicting taunt, which again is going to incline them to use more special attacks. And obviously the power sting damage just bypasses virtually everything. SpiderHam is once again at the very tippy top of the Balagons game mode, in my opinion, and is just absolutely insane. Not to mention the fact that he can also work as a potent defender, with the fact that not that many skill attackers are popular in this meta. SpiderHam can put in work. Now, spot number 2 is going to be Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative is the champion that I reference in comparison to Spider-Man 2099. Virtually every single time, if you're going to place Man-Thing on defense and your opponent's going to place Man-Thing on defense, which is one of the most, if not the most dangerous defender right now in this current meta, Mr. Negative is going to easily outpace Spider-Man 2099 with his immunity to Nullify. Then on top of that, he reduces opponent's combat power rate, which lets you be quite aggressive, and most of the matchups you can pretty much finish with a single level 2, which also gives you 2 Petrifies, so you basically get the same effect that Spider-Man 2099 has with his Withers, but the big difference is that you also inflict up to 20 degenerations on opponent, and with that you can just absolutely melt your opponents. On top of that, the fact that you can gain buffs, but they cannot be nullified. Also in matchups like Man-Thing, you can just capitalize on the fact that Man-Thing is placing pustules on you and ramp up your Mr. Negative quicker. And then obviously you have more inbuilt safety mechanisms against champions that have degeneration, because you can reduce the degeneration or even regenerate because of the degeneration. And that would be against Ebony Maw, should you happen to get degenerated, or Dormammu, or Mojo, or whoever else. And he just answers virtually all of the biggest threats in this meta the best, I feel. And he is one of the MVPs. So you guys are going to be thinking, who is better than that? Who is better than that? And it's Overseer. Overseer at the moment, in my head, is the top attacker, because he is safest, tankiest, fastest. Again, that nullify immunity is coming in clutch, without a doubt. But that way Overseer ramps up now is sped up against every single opponent. Previously, it always took a while to ramp up Overseer somewhat for a while, unless you were going up against something like Toad or Immortal Abomination or Man-Thing or something that would trigger his immunities frequently. But now, you always get to trigger his immunities immediately. And the way you do that is with your nullify immunity. I want to find where it is described in his ability description. Once again, heavy attacks. No. Where is his immunity to nullify, Fate Seal, and stagger? Immune to Fate Seal, nullify, and stagger gamma power. When the opponent gains a bar of power, gain indefinite gamma power. Blah, blah, blah. And I think, does he have to be awakened for that? Yeah, here we go. If an opponent ability fails due to his personal immunity or reduced ability accuracy, they take a burst of damage, and the Overseer gains 1 gamma power. So you do have to have Overseer awakened for this. But the main baseline point is you try to trigger Power Snack on purpose by dexing once, same way as you do with Starking Hand Spiderman. That's going to give you 1 gamma charge. Then you hit opponent once, and then the Power Snack would trigger again, and it's immune, so you gain 2. So basically, how to dex 3 times and hit opponent 3 times, and that is it. Overseer is fully ramped. That means by the time you get to level 1, you can throw it, and you're going to have max duration, max damage, cosmic mode active, and you can just nuke down just about anybody without ever worrying about really baiting out a single special attack from them, and just, doing your combos of light hits and just burst them down with that incredible damage. Again, the fact that you are immune to nullify makes you immune to Power Snack, and the fact that you don't ever have to knock the opponents down aside from the 1 special attack that you throw also means that you do not have to deal with the rise to power. And the man genuinely finishes fights faster than Starking Hand Spiderman, than Spider-Man 2099, than Mr. Negative, and covers such a wide variety of matchups. And on top of that, he's also a respectable defender. So there is that. Absolutely love this guy. Crazy, crazy useful. Has won so many matches to me. Right, that is about it. I do think Overseer and Mr. Negative and Mr. Fantastic are like the best attackers at the moment in the meta. Obviously, all of the champions mentioned in today's video are incredibly, incredibly useful for Battlegrounds. Let me know what you guys think, and I'm going to catch you guys later. See ya. Hello there guys, and welcome back to the channel. So we have all the information about the next